Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Anniversary. Cut. Tiffany Malone adjusted her camera lens, her dark eyes fixed on Edward McBride. Mr. McBride, could you move 2 steps to the right? The lighting hits your face better there. Edward complied without a word, his Tom Ford suit shifting silently as he repositioned himself. At 45, he commanded attention not through theatrical gestures, but through the quiet power that radiated from his stance. The grand ballroom of the Riverside Country Club buzzed with anticipation as 200 guests watched him prepare for his anniversary speech. Perfect, Tiffany murmured, resuming her recording. The documentary filmmaker had spent the past year following Edward's success story, capturing the essence of Boston's most ruthless cybersecurity mogul. Tonight would prove to be the most compelling footage she'd ever shot. Derek Zhang, Edward's chief of security, stood near the entrance, his military-trained eyes scanning the crowd. He noticed Miranda Powell McBride's slight fidget as she sat at the main table, her fingers repeatedly smoothing the fabric of her burgundy evening gown. After 15 years of protecting the McBrides, Derek had learned to read the subtle signs of discomfort. Testing, testing. Edward's voice carried across the room as he tapped the microphone. The casual conversation died down immediately. Miranda, he began, his deep voice filling the silence. 15 years ago, you made me the happiest man alive. From his position, Derek observed Miranda's ash-blonde hair gleaming under the chandeliers, her practiced smile firmly in place. At 42, she remained striking, though something in her eyes seemed distant tonight. Their son James sat beside his girlfriend, Courtney Birch, their young faces bright with admiration for Edward. At 19, James had inherited his father's sharp features and his mother's gentle eyes. Courtney, with her simple black dress and understated makeup, stood out among the designer-clad guests for her unpretentious demeanor. You've all received the special anniversary albums I've prepared, Edward continued, nodding to the waitstaff who distributed leather-bound books to each table. Miranda, darling, would you open yours first? Derek noticed Miranda's hand trembling slightly as she reached for the album. The room fell silent as she opened it, the pages making a soft whisper in the hushed space. What is this? Miranda's voice cracked as she stared at the photographs. Page after page showed her in intimate settings with Randolph Phelps, her company's CFO. Coffee shops, restaurants, hotels, each image more damning than the last. A gasp rippled through the crowd as guests opened their own albums. Edward remained motionless at the podium, his face an impassive mask. I saw your mom at the Pine Grove Motel. Courtney's voice cut through the silence like a knife. She stood up, her face pale but determined. Every Tuesday. With my father. James jerked away from Courtney as if burned. What did you say? I'm sorry, James. Courtney's voice trembled. I wanted to tell you. But what? James demanded, pushing back his chair with such force it toppled over. How long have you known? 3 months, Courtney whispered. The room erupted in chaos. Miranda sat frozen, the album open before her, while guests whispered and pointed. Edward remained at the podium, his expression unchanging as he watched his wife's public undoing. Edward. Miranda finally found her voice, standing on shaky legs. Please, let me explain. Explain what, Miranda? Edward's voice was soft, almost gentle, but those who knew him recognized the dangerous undercurrent. The weekly motel visits? The lunch dates? The private vacations? It's not what you think. Then enlighten me. Edward descended from the podium, each step measured and deliberate. Tell me how the woman I trusted with everything, my love, my company, my life, ended up in these photographs with Randolph Phelps. Derek noticed Bernadette Patrick, Miranda's assistant, slipping out of the room with her phone pressed to her ear. He made a mental note of her hasty exit. "Edward, please," Miranda pleaded, reaching for his arm. "Not here. Not like this." Edward didn't flinch away from her touch. Instead, he caught her wrist in a grip that made her gasp. "Why not here? You didn't seem concerned about privacy at the St. Regis, or the Four Seasons, or the Pine Grove Motel." "Dad," James intervened, his face ashen. "Stop." Edward released Miranda's wrist. "You're right, son. This isn't the place." He turned to address the stunned crowd. "My apologies, everyone. It seems our anniversary celebration has taken an unexpected turn. Please, enjoy the rest of your evening." As guests began to leave in uncomfortable clusters, Derek approached Edward. "Sir, your car is ready." "Thank you, Derek." Edward straightened his tie. "Make sure James gets home safely." "What about Mrs. McBride?" Edward's eyes hardened. "Mrs. McBride can find her own way home tonight." Miranda stood alone at the table, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband walk away. The documentary camera whirred quietly in the background, capturing every moment of her devastation. Courtney approached James hesitantly. "James, please. Let me explain." "Explain?" James laughed bitterly. "You watched my mother destroy our family and said nothing. What is there to explain? I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" James shoved his hands through his hair. "By lying to me? By letting me fall in love with you while you knew what was happening?" "James," Derek interrupted gently, "let me drive you home." James looked at Courtney one last time, his expression a mixture of hurt and disgust. "Stay away from me. Both of you." He stormed out, leaving Courtney crying in the emptying ballroom. Derek followed James, but not before noticing Bernadette Patrick return to the room, her face flushed as she hurriedly gathered Miranda's belongings. Outside, the valet brought around Edward's black Mercedes. As Derek helped James into his own car, he watched his boss slide into the driver's seat, his movements as controlled as ever. In 15 years, Derek had never seen Edward lose his composure, not even tonight when his world fell apart. The Mercedes engine roared to life, and Edward pulled away from the country club, leaving behind a devastated family and a room full of witnesses to his calculated revenge. Derek knew this was only the beginning. Edward McBride had never been one to forgive betrayal, and tonight's performance was merely the opening act of what promised to be a ruthless retribution. Chapter 2. The Empire Builder. The fluorescent lights of Antonio's computer repair flickered weakly as 25-year-old Edward McBride hunched over a customer's laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The small shop in South Boston was quiet except for the hum of old computers and the occasional curse from the back room where Antonio Pollard wrestled with outdated hardware. "Ed." Antonio's voice boomed through the shop. "Come here, kid. Need to show you something." Edward saved his work and made his way to the back. Antonio, a barrel-chested man with graying temples, stood over a dismantled server. "Watch this," he said, pointing to a series of connected wires. "See how they've tried to bypass the security protocols? This is how people steal data. This is how they betray trust." "Who would do this?" Edward asked, studying the modification. "Someone who thought they could outsmart me." Antonio's face darkened. "Remember this, Ed. In this business, trust is everything. But verify everything. People will always try to take what isn't theirs." The bell above the shop door chimed. Edward returned to the front, finding a woman in a navy business suit, examining the store's sparse display of refurbished computers. "Can I help you?" Edward asked, noting her designer handbag and manicured nails. Definitely not their usual clientele. She turned, revealing a striking face framed by ash-blonde hair. I hope so. I'm Miranda Powell from First Boston Trust. I'm looking for Edward McBride. That's me. Edward straightened, suddenly conscious of his worn jeans and faded MIT t-shirt. Miranda's professional smile warmed slightly. Your loan application caught my attention. The encryption algorithm you've developed. It's impressive. You understand encryption? Enough to know when something's revolutionary. She placed her briefcase on the counter. I'd like to discuss your business plan in detail. Are you free for dinner? Before Edward could respond, Antonio emerged from the back. Ed, take the night off. This sounds important. He gave Miranda an appraising look. Just remember what I taught you about trust. That dinner changed everything. Over pasta at a small Italian restaurant, Edward and Miranda discussed his vision for McBride Technologies. She asked pointed questions about his algorithm, his market strategy, his 5-year plan. By dessert, Edward knew he'd found someone who truly understood his potential. The bank's investment committee will need convincing, Miranda admitted, but I believe in your idea. And I believe in you. 6 months later, Edward stood in his first real office, a modest space in a downtown building, watching as his best friend and co-founder, Terry Gorman, set up their computers. We did it, Ed, Terry grinned, his red hair wild from running his hands through it. McBride Technologies is officially open for business. McBride and Gorman Technologies, Edward corrected. You're as much a part of this as I am. Terry's smile faltered slightly. About that, my name's not on the patent applications. The algorithms are my work, Terry. You know that. Edward's voice carried a warning note. You handle sales. I handle development. That was our agreement. Right. Terry turned back to the computers. Just thought as co-founders. Terry. Edward's tone made his friend look up. Don't push this. Their conversation was interrupted by Miranda's arrival. She'd become a frequent visitor to the office, officially to monitor the bank's investment, unofficially because she and Edward had begun dating. The security system's being installed next week, she announced, kissing Edward's cheek. Derek Zhang's company submitted the best bid. Derek Zhang? Terry asked. The guy from your Army Reserve unit? Edward nodded. I trust him with my life. The years that followed were a blur of 18-hour workdays, breakthrough developments, and rapidly expanding client lists. Edward's encryption algorithm revolutionized cybersecurity, attracting attention from major corporations and government agencies. Then came the betrayal. Edward was working late one night when Derek Zhang burst into his office. We've been compromised, he reported, his military training evident in his clipped tones. Someone's trying to access the patent files. Edward's fingers flew across his keyboard, tracing the breach. The source stopped him cold, Terry Gorman's computer. Give me everything, Edward ordered. Every file, every email, every phone record. The evidence was damning. Terry had been secretly meeting with competitors, planning to steal the patents and sell them to the highest bidder. He'd even approached Antonio Pollard, trying to get dirt on Edward's early development work. Edward called an emergency board meeting. Terry sat confidently at the conference table, unaware that his world was about to implode. Before we begin, Edward announced, I'd like to address a security breach. He nodded to Derek, who distributed folders to the board members. These documents detail an attempted theft of company intellectual property. Terry's face went pale as he opened his folder. Ed, I can explain. Save it. Edward's voice was ice. Derek, please escort Mr. Gorman from the building. His credentials have already been revoked. You can't do this. Terry shouted as security guards appeared. I built this company too. Edward remained seated as his former friend was dragged out. Miranda, please contact our lawyers. I want him buried. The legal battle that followed was brutal. Edward deployed resource, connection, piece of evidence to destroy Terry Gorman. When it was over, Terry was bankrupted, his reputation ruined, reduced to living in a small apartment in Providence. Antonio visited Edward after the dust settled. "You did the right thing," he said. "In business and in life, you can't show mercy to those who betray trust." 2 months later, Antonio suffered a fatal heart attack. The autopsy revealed he'd been under immense stress from losing his life savings to a fraudulent investment scheme. Edward added another lesson to his arsenal. Betrayal comes in many forms, and all of them are deadly. The next decade saw McBride Technologies grow into an empire. Edward's reputation for brilliant innovation was matched only by his reputation for ruthless retribution against anyone who crossed him. Miranda stood by his side through it all, their partnership seemingly unbreakable, until Randolph Phelps entered their lives. "He's perfect for the CFO position," Miranda argued during a dinner at their Beacon Hill home. "His track record for growth is impressive." Edward studied his wife's animated expression. "You seem very enthusiastic about this hire." "I've known Randolph for years through industry events. He's brilliant with numbers, and Powell Financial could use his expertise." Edward agreed, trusting his wife's judgment. It would be 5 years before he discovered the true cost of that trust. Later that night, as Miranda slept beside him, Edward received a text from Derek. "Background check complete on Phelps. You need to see this." Edward slipped out of bed and went to his study. The report revealed a pattern. 3 previous firms, 3 instances of missing funds, 3 ex-wives left in financial ruin. But nothing could ever be proven, and Phelps always emerged unscathed. Edward closed the file and poured himself a scotch. He'd learned long ago to trust his instincts about people, and something about Randolph Phelps set off warning bells. But Miranda believed in him, and Edward believed in Miranda. It would be his only mistake. Chapter 3. The Other Man. Randolph Phelps adjusted his Hermes tie in the mirror of his penthouse apartment, admiring how the silk complemented his silver hair. At 48, he'd mastered the art of appearance, from his carefully tailored suits to his cultured accent. Everything about him was designed to project sophistication and success. The phone on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Phelps," his assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. "Della Brennan is here again. She's demanding to see you." Randolph sighed. His third ex-wife had become increasingly problematic since discovering the truth about their joint accounts. "Call security." "And Sandra? Make sure they escort her all the way out of the building this time." He could hear Della's shouts through his office door. "He's a fraud. He'll destroy everything you have, just like he destroyed me." Randolph adjusted his cufflinks. "Platinum, a gift from Miranda last month," and smiled at his reflection. Poor Della. She'd never understood that trust was merely a tool, like any other, to be used and discarded when necessary. His phone vibrated with a text from Miranda. "The kids are gone, and Edward's at a conference in Singapore. Come over." Randolph's smile widened. Miranda Powell McBride had proven to be his masterpiece. Wealthy, well-connected, and deliciously vulnerable to flattery. It had taken months of careful manipulation. Casual lunches to discuss strategy, late-night meetings that turned into intimate dinners, gentle touches that lingered just long enough to spark desire, but not long enough to trigger alarm. "I'll bring wine," he texted back. An hour later, he sat in Miranda's kitchen, watching her laugh at his carefully curated stories. She'd changed from her business attire into a casual sweater that exposed one shoulder, her guard completely down. "Edward never has time anymore," she confided, twirling her wine glass. "It's all about the company, the next acquisition, the next victory. He doesn't appreciate what he has," Randolph murmured, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "You deserve more, Miranda." She didn't pull away. Sometimes I wonder if he ever really loved me, or if I was just another asset to acquire. I know exactly how you feel. Randolph let vulnerability seep into his voice. My ex-wives never understood me either. But you're different. Later, as Miranda slept in his arms, Randolph accessed her phone. Her passwords were pathetically easy to guess. James's birthday, the date of her wedding to Edward. He quickly forwarded several confidential emails about Powell Financial's pension fund to his secure server. The familiar thrill of conquest surged through him. Miranda was his most ambitious project yet. Not just another wealthy woman to manipulate, but his gateway to two prestigious firms. Through her, he could access both Powell Financial's assets and, potentially, McBride Technology's security systems. His phone buzzed softly. A message from Bernadette Patrick, Miranda's assistant. Mr. McBride's flight lands tomorrow morning, not evening as scheduled. Randolph smiled. Bernadette had proven to be an invaluable asset. Her brother's humiliation at McBride Technologies had left her hungry for revenge, making her eager to help destroy Edward McBride's perfect life. I should go, he whispered, gently waking Miranda. Edward returns tomorrow. Miranda's eyes flickered open, panic briefly crossing her face. So soon? I thought. Sure. He kissed her forehead. I'll see you at the office. We have that pension fund meeting, remember? As he dressed, Randolph glimpsed his reflection in Miranda's vanity mirror. Behind him, he could see her watching him with adoring eyes, completely unaware that his phone had just captured several compromising photos of their encounter. Insurance, he thought, straightening his tie. One never knew when such things might prove useful. 20 minutes later, he sat in his car, reviewing the financial documents he'd stolen. The pension fund was his gold mine, complex enough to hide fraudulent transactions, large enough to make the risk worthwhile. Miranda's access codes would make the theft untraceable, to him, at least. His phone rang, Della Brennan again. He declined the call, remembering how she discovered his schemes during their marriage. She'd been clever, but not clever enough. By the time she understood the full scope of his manipulation, he'd already destroyed her credibility, painted her as a mentally unstable woman bitter about their divorce. A text message from Bernadette lit up his screen. Ms. Brennan was asking questions at the office today. Should I be concerned? Handle it, he replied. Bernadette's position as Miranda's assistant made her perfect for managing such annoyances. She'd already planted rumors about Della's instability among the office staff. Randolph drove to his penthouse, his mind racing with plans. The upcoming anniversary party would require careful management. He'd have to coach Miranda on maintaining her composure in public, especially with that documentary filmmaker constantly hovering around. The doorman greeted him with a deferential nod. Good evening, Mr. Phelps. Ms. Birch was asking about you earlier. Randolph froze momentarily. Courtney? Yes, sir. Your daughter. She seemed quite insistent. I have no daughter, Randolph replied coldly. If she returns, call security. In his apartment, he poured himself a scotch and reviewed his contingency plans. Courtney was a complication he hadn't anticipated. His daughter's job at the Pine Grove Motel had seemed like useful coincidence at first, a convenient meeting spot for his rendezvous with Miranda. He hadn't expected her to start dating James McBride. His computer chimed with an encrypted email from Terry Gorman. The bitter ex-partner of Edward McBride had jumped at the chance to assist in Randolph's scheme, eager to finally take revenge on the man who destroyed him. Terry's insider knowledge of McBride Technology's early security systems had proven invaluable. Everything in place, Terry's message read. Just waiting for your signal. Randolph smiled, savoring his scotch. Edward McBride, the great empire builder, had no idea his perfect life was built on sand. In his arrogance, He'd forgotten the most important lesson of all. Those who trust blindly deserve to be betrayed. A notification popped up on his phone. Another message from Miranda. "I miss you already." He typed a carefully crafted response, full of longing and promises. Women like Miranda were so easily manipulated by the illusion of romance. Edward had given her wealth and status, but he'd failed to give her what she truly craved: attention, admiration, passion. Randolph had spotted this weakness the moment they met, and he'd exploited it masterfully. The next morning, Randolph arrived at Powell Financial early, knowing Miranda would seek him out before Edward's return. She appeared in his office doorway right on schedule, looking nervous in her designer suit. "Randolph," she whispered, closing the door. "We need to talk about the pension fund meeting." He rose to embrace her, his hands sliding possessively down her back. "Everything's under control, darling. Trust me." The word trust nearly made him laugh. In all his years of conquests and schemes, no one had ever noticed how he wielded trust like a weapon, using it to disarm his victims before striking the fatal blow. Miranda melted into his embrace, completely oblivious to the fact that her access codes were already being used to siphon millions from the pension fund she was supposed to protect. In the game Randolph played, trust wasn't just blind, it was deadly. "Next week is our anniversary party," she murmured against his chest. "Edward's planning something special." "I'm sure he is," Randolph replied, thinking of his own plans for that night. Edward McBride wasn't the only one who knew how to orchestrate a spectacular fall from grace. As he held Miranda, Randolph caught their reflection in his office window. He saw what everyone else saw: the sophisticated businessman comforting a trusted colleague. No one would suspect the predator beneath the polished exterior, just as no one had suspected him at his previous firms. By the time they realized the truth, it would be far too late. The intercom buzzed, Bernadette warning him that Edward's car had just pulled up to the building. Randolph gently disentangled himself from Miranda, straightening her collar with practiced tenderness. "Go," he said softly. "We don't want to raise suspicions." "Not when we're so close." Miranda nodded, retrieving her composure like a well-worn mask. As she left his office, Randolph watched her walk away, marveling at how easy it had been to destroy what Edward McBride had spent decades building. In his desk drawer, a USB drive contained everything he needed: the compromising photos, the detailed records of their affair, the carefully crafted evidence that would implicate Miranda in the pension fund theft. Soon, very soon, he would destroy both Powell Financial and McBride Technologies in one magnificent coup. And Edward McBride, the man who never forgot a betrayal, would finally learn what true betrayal felt like. Chapter 4: The Aftermath. Edward McBride's black Mercedes cut through the darkness as he drove away from the Riverside Country Club. His hands gripped the steering wheel with controlled force, his face an expressionless mask. The leather-bound album sat in the passenger seat, a silent reminder of 15 years of betrayal. His phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from Miranda. He pressed a button, silencing them all. Only one call got through, from his son James. "Dad." James's voice cracked. "Where are you going?" "The cabin. I need time to think." "Let me come with you." "No." Edward's voice softened slightly. "Stay with Derek. He'll take care of you." "What about Mom?" Edward's jaw tightened. "Your mother made her choice." The line went dead as Edward turned off his phone. 3 hours later, he pulled up to his cabin in the Berkshires. Derek Zhang's SUV was already parked outside. His chief of security knew him well enough to anticipate his moves. "The perimeter is secure," Derek reported as Edward entered. "No reporters have followed us." Edward nodded, pouring himself a scotch. "What do we know about Randolph's finances?" "I've had someone watching him for months." Derek pulled out a tablet. He's been making regular transfers to offshore accounts. Small amounts, nothing suspicious on the surface. And Bernadette Patrick left the party immediately after your announcement. Made 3 calls. 1 to Randolph, 2 to numbers we're still tracing. Edward sat in his leather armchair, mind already formulating plans. Get me everything on Powell Financial's pension fund. That's where he'll have hidden the real damage. Already on it. Derek hesitated. Sir, the documentary filmmaker, Tiffany Malone, what about her? She captured everything. The reveal, Miranda's reaction, Bernadette's exit. Could be useful. Edward's lips curved in a cold smile. Set up a meeting. 3 days passed in the cabin. Edward and Derek worked in focused silence, building a strategy that would destroy not just Randolph, but everyone involved in the betrayal. On the 4th morning, Tiffany Malone arrived at the cabin. She found Edward in his study, reviewing financial documents. Mr. McBride, she said, setting up her camera, I have footage you might want to see. Edward watched as Tiffany played back moments from the past year. Subtle touches between Miranda and Randolph at corporate events, whispered conversations in corners, meaningful glances across rooms. All caught on camera, all part of the story she'd been documenting. What do you want? Edward asked. To continue filming. Tiffany met his gaze steadily. This isn't just a story about success anymore. It's about justice. Justice? Edward laughed harshly. No, this is about revenge. Then let me document that. Edward studied her for a moment. You'll show everything? No matter how ugly it gets. Everything. Derek, Edward called. Draw up an exclusivity contract for Ms. Malone. Back in Boston, James sat in his childhood bedroom, staring at photos of himself and Courtney. His phone displayed dozens of missed calls and messages from her. He clicked on one. James, please. I wanted to tell you, but he's my father. I didn't know what to do. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Derek entered, carrying a laptop. Your father's calling a board meeting tomorrow, Derek said. He wants you there. Why? Because you're his son, and because it's time you learned how he handles betrayal. The next morning, Edward strode into McBride Technologies' boardroom. Gone was the charismatic leader who joked with employees and charmed investors. In his place stood a man radiating cold fury. Ladies and gentlemen, he addressed the board, Tiffany's camera rolling in the corner. We have a situation. Powell Financial's pension fund has been compromised. Our preliminary investigation suggests systematic theft over the past year. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Everyone had seen the photos from the anniversary party. I'm implementing an aggressive expansion strategy, Edward continued. We'll begin acquiring Powell Financial's distressed assets through shell companies. Derek will provide each of you with detailed instructions. And Mrs. McBride's position? Someone asked. Edward's eyes turned glacial. My wife's access to all company systems has been revoked. Any communication from her should be directed to our legal team. After the meeting, James approached his father. Dad, about Courtney. Not now, James. Edward checked his phone. Go see Ray Gray. Find out what he knows about Randolph's approach. Ray? What are you talking about? Your best friend kept secrets too. Edward's voice was cold. Time to find out why. James found Ray in their shared lab at MIT. His friend's face went pale when James entered. I should have told you, Ray blurted out. Randolph approached me 3 months ago. Wanted me to hack into your dad's systems. James felt the breath leave his lungs. What? I said no. Ray held up his hands. But I should have warned you. I didn't know if you'd believe me. Back at the hotel, Miranda sat surrounded by newspapers reporting her public humiliation. Her phone rang. Randolph. Don't worry, darling. His smooth voice oozed through the speaker. This will blow over. Miranda gripped the phone tighter. blow over? Edward destroyed me in front of everyone we know. He's shown his true colors. Now you see why I've been telling you to leave him. You knew, Miranda whispered. You knew he was going to do this. Randolph's laugh was soft. Edward's not the only one who knows how to plan ahead. Now, about those pension fund reports. In her office at Powell Financial, Bernadette Patrick frantically deleted files from her computer. Her phone buzzed with a text from Randolph. Protect yourself. Edward's coming. She glanced at the photo on her desk. Her brother, broken and unemployable after Edward had destroyed him. Her revenge had felt sweet, until now. Now, it felt like signing her own death warrant. The sun had set by the time Edward returned to the cabin. Derek waited with new information. Randolph's been busy, Derek reported. Large withdrawals from Powell Financial, all authorized using Miranda's codes. Edward stared into the darkness beyond his window. He's running. Want me to stop him?
No.
Edward's voice was deadly quiet. Let him think he's winning. The bigger his theft, the harder he'll fall. In the guest room, Tiffany reviewed her footage from the day. Edward McBride's transformation was stunning. From betrayed husband to avenging destroyer. She hadn't just documented his success story. She was documenting his evolution into something far more dangerous. Chapter 5. The Investigation. Beverly Browning's office resembled a war room. Photos, documents, and financial records covered the walls. The private investigator had built her reputation on discretion and results, but Edward McBride's case was different. This wasn't just about gathering evidence. It was about building a weapon. Walk me through it, Edward commanded, studying the display. Beverly pointed to a series of bank statements. Randolph's pattern is consistent. He enters a company, identifies vulnerabilities, and exploits them. But he never works alone. Bernadette Patrick, Derek added from his position by the door. More than that, Beverly tapped a photo of Terry Gorman. Your old friend has been busy. Monthly meetings with Randolph going back 10 years. Edward's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched. Show me. Beverly pulled up surveillance photos. They met regularly at a bar in Providence. Always on the third Thursday, always for exactly 1 hour. The patent theft attempt, Edward mused. That was Randolph's work? He provided the funding. Terry provided the inside knowledge. Beverly hesitated. There's more. About Antonio Pollard. Edward's head snapped up. What about Antonio? The investment scheme that ruined him? Randolph was behind it. He used the same tactics. Charm, manipulation, insider knowledge. Edward stood motionless, processing this information. His mentor's death hadn't been just bad luck. It had been orchestrated by the same man who was now trying to destroy him. Sir, Derek interrupted. Miranda's here. Edward turned to see his wife standing in the doorway. Her designer clothes couldn't hide her exhaustion. You need to listen to me, Miranda said. About Randolph. Sit down. Edward's voice was ice. Tell us about the pension fund. Miranda's face paled. What? Your access codes have been used to withdraw millions. Either you're part of it, or you're more foolish than I thought. He said he needed temporary access for an audit. Miranda's voice shook. I didn't know. You never know, do you, Miranda? Edward's contempt was palpable. You didn't know about Terry's betrayal. You didn't know about Bernadette's true loyalty. You didn't know your lover was stealing from your company. He has photos, Miranda whispered. Videos. He'll release them if I don't help him. Of course he does. Edward turned to Beverly. Find them. All of them. After Miranda left, Beverly pulled out another file. There's something you should see about Bernadette Patrick. The file revealed a complex web of connections. Bernadette's brother hadn't just worked with Terry. He'd been Terry's main contact during the patent theft attempt. When Edward destroyed Terry, Bernadette's brother had been collateral damage. She's been planning this for years, Beverly explained. Worked her way into Miranda's confidence, became indispensable, all while feeding information to Randolph. Edward's phone buzzed. A text from James. Ray told me everything. Randolph tried to recruit him for a hack. Get me everything on Ray Gray, Edward ordered, and find out who else Randolph approached at MIT. Derek's military contacts provided another piece of the puzzle. They uncovered Randolph's earliest schemes, including his involvement in Antonio's downfall. The pattern was always the same. Find a vulnerability, exploit it, destroy the evidence. But this time, Randolph had made a mistake. He'd underestimated Edward's capacity for revenge. Later that night, Miranda sat in her hotel room, finally seeing the full scope of Randolph's manipulation. The late-night meetings that always seemed to happen when Edward was away. The subtle suggestions that Edward didn't appreciate her. The gradual isolation from her friends and family. Her phone rang. Randolph again. Have you spoken to Edward? His smooth voice asked.
Yes.
Miranda's hand trembled. He knows about the pension fund. Unfortunate. Randolph's tone hardened. Remember our arrangement. Those photos would destroy what's left of your reputation. You bastard, Miranda whispered. Now, darling, is that any way to talk to the man who owns you? From her surveillance van outside the hotel, Beverly Browning recorded every word. Another piece of evidence for Edward's arsenal. At MIT, James sat with Ray in their empty lab. Tell me everything, James demanded. From the beginning. Ray described Randolph's approach, the casual meeting that wasn't casual at all, the subtle questions about McBride Technologies' security protocols, the eventual offer of money for access. I said no, Ray insisted. But he hinted there were others, backup plans. Why didn't you tell me? He said he was working with your mom. Ray looked away. Said it was for your dad's birthday surprise. James laughed bitterly. Some surprise. In her office, Bernadette Patrick received an unexpected visitor, Derek Zhang. Mr. McBride sends his regards, Derek said, placing a USB drive on her desk. He thought you might want to see this. The drive contained emails between her brother and Terry Gorman, proving their involvement in the patent theft. Emails she thought had been destroyed. What does he want? Bernadette's voice shook. Everything you know about Randolph's operation. Derek's smile was cold. Consider it your only chance at redemption. Edward sat in his study, reviewing Beverly's latest findings. The evidence was mounting, not just against Randolph, but against everyone who had aided him. Sir, Derek entered with fresh intelligence. We found Randolph's ex-wife, Della Brennan. Edward looked up. Bring her in. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, very soon, he would show them all why betraying Edward McBride was the last mistake they'd ever make. Chapter 6. The Alliance. The Pine Grove Motel's neon sign buzzed in the darkness as Courtney Birch paced behind the front desk. Her father's briefcase sat in the motel safe, its contents unknown but clearly precious enough to check regularly. A familiar black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Courtney's heart raced as Edward McBride stepped out. Mr. McBride, she stammered. Sit down, Courtney. Edward's voice was surprisingly gentle. Tell me about the briefcase. Courtney described her father's Tuesday routine. How he'd arrive with Miranda, check the briefcase in the safe, meet in room 112 for exactly 2 hours. He never opens it here, she added. But sometimes I hear him on the phone, talking about documents and transfers. Edward nodded. And how long have you known about your father and my wife? 3 months. Tears filled Courtney's eyes. I wanted to tell James, but Dad said he'd lose everything if anyone found out. He'll lose everything anyway. Edward's tone was matter of fact. The question is, will you help us make sure he loses it the right way? At MIT, James and Ray sat in Professor Chin's empty classroom, surrounded by computers. If we track the money, Ray explained, we can prove where it went. But we need access to Powell financial systems. James pulled out his phone. Dad, we need help. Within an hour, Derek arrived with the necessary codes. Your mother's access still works. Randolph doesn't know we're watching. Together, they began tracing the complex web of transactions. Ray's expertise in cybersecurity proved invaluable as they uncovered hidden accounts and mass transfers. Look at this. Ray pointed to a pattern. The money moves through 7 different banks before disappearing into offshore accounts. Not disappearing, James corrected. Waiting. In Providence, Terry Gorman sat in his cramped apartment, nursing a cheap bourbon. A knock at his door revealed Edward McBride. Come to gloat? Terry asked bitterly. Come to offer you a deal. Edward stepped inside. Help me destroy Randolph, and all debts are forgiven. Terry laughed harshly. Why should I trust you? Because he betrayed you too. Edward placed a file on the table. Or did you think you were the only one he promised to make rich? The file contained proof that Randolph had played both sides during the patent theft attempt, ensuring Terry would take the fall while he remained clean. That bastard, Terry whispered. Help me, Edward pressed. Help me, and you get a second chance. Back at Beverly's office, Tiffany Malone reviewed footage from corporate events. Her trained eye caught subtle interactions between Miranda and Randolph. A touch here, a glance there. It's all here, she told Edward. A year's worth of documentation. Good. Edward studied the footage. We'll need it for the grand finale. Della Brennan arrived next, clutching a briefcase of her own. I tried to warn her, she said. I tried to warn them all. Now you can do more than warn. Edward's voice held the promise of retribution. You can help us destroy him. The alliance was forming, James and Ray tracking the money, Courtney providing access to crucial evidence, Terry revealing old secrets, Tiffany documenting everything, and Della ready to testify about Randolph's past schemes. In his cabin that night, Edward reviewed their progress. Derek stood ready with updates, Beverly compiled evidence, and the trap was nearly set. Sir, Derek reported, Randolph's getting nervous. He's accelerated the transfers. Perfect. Edward's smile was predatory. Let him dig his own grave. Derek handed over another report. Beverly found something in the motel safe. A backup drive. Contents. Financial records from his previous companies. Names, dates, amounts. Everything he's tried to hide. Edward poured 2 glasses of scotch, handing one to Derek. Call James. Tell him and Ray to focus on Powell Financial Systems. I want to know exactly how he's accessing them. At MIT, James and Ray worked through the night, their screens filled with code and financial data. Courtney brought them coffee, her presence a quiet support despite the lingering tension. Found something, Ray announced at 3 a.m. He's using a backdoor in the accounting software. Classic man-in-the-middle attack. James studied the code. Can we trace it? Better. Ray grinned. We can duplicate it. Make him think his tracks are covered while actually marking every move. Terry Gorman arrived with more intel. His years of bitterness turned into focused determination. Randolph's getting sloppy. He called his broker today, moving large sums to Singapore. Dad, James called. We've got his pattern. He transfers funds every Tuesday night, right after. After meeting Miranda, Courtney finished quietly. Edward nodded to Derek. Set up surveillance at the motel. Next Tuesday, we document everything. Tiffany's camera captured their planning sessions, the determination on their faces as they built their case. Her documentary was evolving into something far more complex than a simple success story. Beverly brought in Della Brennan's testimony, pages of detailed accounts of Randolph's previous schemes. He always follows the same pattern, Della explained. Charm, seduce, isolate, destroy. Not this time, Edward promised. In her hotel room, Miranda stared at her phone. Another threatening message from Randolph. She picked up the device Beverly had given her and pressed record. Each threat, each demand would become another nail in Randolph's coffin. "You're sure about this?" Beverly asked her. "Once we start, there's no going back." Miranda thought of her son's face at the anniversary party, of Edward's cold fury, of Randolph's smug manipulation. "I'm sure." At the Pine Grove Motel, Courtney provided copies of security footage showing Randolph's regular visits. He always requests room 112, always pays cash. But look at this. She pointed to footage of him entering the office late at night, heading for the safe. James squeezed her hand. "You're doing the right thing." "I know." She met his eyes. "I should have done it sooner." Ray worked with Derek to set up additional security cameras around the motel. "If he follows his usual pattern, we'll have him on Tuesday." Terry brought in old documents from the patent theft attempt, proving Randolph's involvement. "He kept everything," Terry explained. "Blackmail material. Insurance." "Now it's our insurance," Edward said. They gathered in Beverly's office for a final planning session. The wall displayed their evidence: financial records, surveillance photos, witness statements, digital traces. "One week," Edward announced. "Next Tuesday, everything comes together." Tiffany's camera panned across the room, capturing the determined faces of this unlikely alliance. The betrayed son, the guilt-ridden girlfriend, the reformed friend, the scorned ex-wife, all united in their mission to bring down Randolph Phelps. "Remember," Edward addressed them, "Randolph thinks he's winning. He thinks Miranda's under his control. The pension fund is his escape route, and his tracks are covered." "But we've got him," James said. "No." Edward's voice was steel. "We're going to destroy him." As they dispersed, Derek remained behind with Edward. "Sir, about Miranda. What about her?" "She's agreed to play her part. But after this is over..." Edward cut him off. "After this is over, nothing will be the same." "That's the point." In the parking lot, James caught up with Courtney. "I'm sorry," he said, "for how I reacted at the party. You had every right." "No." He took her hand. "You were trapped, just like my mom. But you're helping make it right." Inside, Edward reviewed their battle plan one final time. The trap was set, the players in position. Years of built-up anger, betrayal, and revenge were about to culminate in one decisive strike. "Sir," Derek said softly, "it's almost midnight." Edward nodded, gathering his coat. In 1 week, Randolph Phelps would learn why crossing Edward McBride was a fatal mistake. The man who had destroyed Antonio Pollard, who had manipulated Miranda, who had tried to steal his empire. That man's downfall was now inevitable. As Edward drove home, Tiffany's final shot captured his expression, not of anger or hatred, but of pure, focused determination. The kind of look that promised not just revenge, but complete annihilation. The stage was set. The alliance was formed. And Edward McBride was ready to show Boston what happened to those who dared to betray him. Chapter 7. The Trap. Edward McBride sat in his study, reviewing the latest financial reports from Powell Financial. The numbers told a story, one of desperation and greed. Randolph Phelps had accelerated his theft, pulling millions from the pension fund in increasingly risky transfers. "Perfect," Edward muttered, making notes in his leather-bound journal. Derek Zhang entered, carrying a USB drive. "Sir, James and Ray have completed the cyber trap. Any access to our systems will be tracked and logged." "And the merger leak?" "Already circulating through the right channels. Our sources confirm Randolph's been making calls to his brokers." Edward's phone buzzed. A text from Beverly Browning. Briefcase contents copied. You need to see this. 20 minutes later, Beverly spread photographs across Edward's desk. Document after document detailed Randolph's previous schemes, falsified records, manipulated accounts, blackmail material. He kept everything, Beverly explained. Proof of fraud from all 3 previous companies. Bank statements, transfer records, even emails planning the schemes. Arrogance, Edward said. He never thought anyone would find it. There's more. Beverly pulled out another file. Della Brennan came forward. She has documentation of his earliest frauds, including his involvement in Antonio's case. Edward's hand tightened on his pen. Bring her in. Della Brennan arrived an hour later, a sharp-featured woman carrying years of anger in her stance. Mr. McBride, she said, I tried to warn your wife. Tell me about Antonio Pollard. Randolph used the same playbook. Gained trust, accessed accounts, created false investment opportunities. By the time Antonio realized what happened, his savings were gone. Edward's face remained impassive, but his eyes burned. And you have proof? Better. Della opened her briefcase. I have the original documents. Randolph thought he destroyed them all, but I kept copies. I've been waiting for someone strong enough to take him down. At MIT, James and Ray worked in their secured lab, monitoring the digital trap they'd set. He's testing the waters, Ray reported, pointing to his screen. Probing our firewalls, looking for weaknesses. James nodded. Let him think he's found one. Dad wants him confident. Courtney entered with coffee and printouts. The motel's security footage shows him moving something from the briefcase to a safety deposit box at First Boston Trust. Dad's already got people inside the bank, James said. Everything he touches, we track. Miranda sat in Beverly's office, listening to recordings of Randolph's threats. If these photos get out, his smooth voice played from the speaker, you'll lose everything. Your reputation, your son's respect, your position, all gone. Miranda's hands shook as she signed her statement. I was such a fool. No, Beverly corrected. You were a mark, like all the others. But now you can help stop him. Edward called a private meeting with his allies. James, Ray, Courtney, Beverly, Derek, and Tiffany gathered in his study. The merger announcement goes out tomorrow, Edward explained. Randolph will move quickly to capitalize on the insider information. James, your team tracks digital activity. Courtney, monitor the motel. Beverly, coordinate with Della. Derek, security teams in place. At all locations, Derek confirmed. We can move on your signal. Ms. Malone, Edward turned to Tiffany, your cameras catch everything. I want his downfall documented in detail. What about Mom? James asked. She plays her part. Edward's voice held no emotion. One last meeting to convince him she's still under his control. Later that night, Miranda entered their home for the first time since the party. Edward waited in his study. The evidence of Randolph's crimes spread before him. Sit down, he commanded. Look at what your lover's been doing. Miranda reviewed the documents, her face paling. I never knew. Of course not. You were too busy betraying your family to notice you were being played. Edward's voice cut like steel. Tomorrow, you go to him. Act desperate. Tell him you'll help him access the merger information. And then you watch him fall. Edward stood. Consider it your last act as my wife. In his penthouse, Randolph received Miranda's call. Edward knows about the merger, she said, her voice trembling perfectly. He's planning something big. Don't worry, darling. Randolph smiled. I'll handle everything. Come to my office tomorrow morning. He hung up, satisfied. His offshore accounts were ready. One last big score. The merger information would be worth millions to the right buyers. Then he'd disappear, leaving Miranda to face the consequences. The pieces were in place. Edward's trap was set, baited with the perfect blend of greed and opportunity. Tomorrow, Randolph Phelps would learn the price of betraying Edward McBride. Chapter 8. The Execution. The boardroom of Powell Financial hummed with tension as Randolph Phelps prepared his quarterly financial presentation. Board members shifted in their seats, reviewing the reports he'd distributed. As you can see, Randolph gestured to his charts, our growth this quarter exceeds projections by 20%. The boardroom door opened. Edward McBride entered, followed by federal agents. Derek Zhang and Beverly Browning flanked him, while Tiffany Malone's camera captured every moment. Mr. Phelps, Edward's voice carried across the room. I believe those numbers need revision. Randolph maintained his composure. Edward, this is a private board meeting. Special Agent Harrison. Edward nodded to one of the agents. Please share the real numbers. The agent stepped forward, distributing new documents. Mr. Phelps, we have evidence of systematic theft from the company's pension fund, totaling over $50 million. Ridiculous. Randolph laughed smoothly. These transactions were all approved by proper authorities. You mean these authorizations? Beverly placed a file on the table. The ones you obtained by blackmailing Miranda McBride? Randolph's smile faltered slightly. Edward approached the table, his presence commanding attention. Your briefcase made interesting reading, Edward continued. Detailed records of all your previous schemes. Did you think the motel safe was secure? The color drained from Randolph's face. His eyes darted to the door, where more agents waited. Your offshore accounts have been frozen, Edward explained calmly. Your emergency passports have been flagged. The evidence is comprehensive, from all 3 previous companies, plus Powell Financial. You can't prove anything, Randolph snarled. Actually, James's voice came from a speaker. We can track every digital move you've made, including your attempts to steal merger information this morning. Ray's voice joined in. The cyber trap worked perfectly. Each keystroke logged and documented. Randolph lunged for his phone. Agent Harrison caught his arm. That won't be necessary, sir. This is harassment, Randolph blustered. My lawyers will. Your lawyers might be busy, Beverly interrupted, projecting images onto the screen. These photos from your briefcase implicate them in several fraudulent schemes. The boardroom door opened again. Della Brennan entered, followed by Terry Gorman. Hello, Randolph. Della's voice dripped contempt. Remember those documents you thought you destroyed? Terry stepped forward. Or our conversations about Edward's patents. I recorded everything. Randolph's sophisticated facade cracked. Miranda, he shouted. Tell them you authorized everything. Miranda emerged from the back of the room, steel in her voice. I've given my statement to the FBI, Randolph. About the blackmail, the threats, everything. Edward stepped closer to Randolph, his voice low and deadly. Did you think I wouldn't find out about Antonio Pollard? That I wouldn't discover you were behind his destruction? Who? Randolph tried to scoff, but fear had crept into his eyes. My mentor. The man you drove to his death with your first major fraud. Edward's words fell like hammer blows. I've spent months preparing your downfall. While you played your little games with my wife, I was dismantling your entire world. Agent Harrison stepped forward with handcuffs. Randolph Phelps, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, blackmail. Wait. Randolph's composure shattered completely. I can make a deal. I have information. Take him, Edward commanded. As agents led Randolph away, Edward turned to address the board. Ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement. Over the past month, I've been acquiring controlling interest in Powell Financial through various shell corporations. He distributed ownership documents. Effective immediately, Powell Financial will merge with McBride Technologies. A full audit will begin tomorrow. Tiffany's camera captured Randolph's final moments in the boardroom. His elegant suit wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled, his confident smirk replaced by desperate fear. In her office, Bernadette Patrick watched the arrest unfold on her computer screen. She reached for her phone, intending to delete incriminating files. "I wouldn't." Ray's voice came from her doorway. He entered with 2 agents. "All files are already secured and backed up." "How?" Bernadette started. "We've had your systems mirrored for weeks," Ray explained. "Edward sends his regards." "This is about my brother," she said bitterly. "After what Edward did to him." "Your brother committed corporate espionage," Ray corrected. "Just like you." "Agents, she's all yours." Edward watched from his office as Bernadette was escorted out in handcuffs. Derek stood beside him, monitoring security feeds. "All targets acquired," Derek reported. "Bank accounts frozen. Evidence secured." Edward nodded. "And Terry?" "Kept his end of the deal. His testimony alone would convict Randolph." Miranda appeared in the doorway. "Edward, the divorce papers will be ready tomorrow." He cut her off. "Your settlement is fair, but non-negotiable." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I never meant—" "Get out." His voice held no emotion. "You've played your part. We're done." Tiffany's camera captured Miranda's exit. The last time she would walk through the halls of the empire she had helped build and then nearly destroyed. Chapter 9. The Resolution. 6 months later, Edward stood at the head of the merged company's main conference room. The McBride-Powell Group logo dominated the wall behind him as he addressed his executive team. "The transition is complete," he announced. "All pension funds have been restored, with interest. The SEC investigation is closed. We begin a new chapter." James sat to his right, now head of cybersecurity operations. Ray Gray, his deputy, managed their expanded security protocols. Together, they had rebuilt the company's digital defenses, making them virtually impenetrable. Quarterly profits up 40%, James reported. The merger actually strengthened market confidence. Courtney, newly appointed to the management training program, presented the next segment. Her detailed knowledge of financial systems had proven invaluable during the transition. Client retention rate at 97%, she stated confidently. "The transparency of our new security measures has restored trust." Edward watched her with approval. She had his own early determination, the drive that had taken him from South Boston to corporate heights. Terry Gorman, rehabilitated and grateful, managed a small but crucial division. His experience with both sides of corporate betrayal made him particularly effective at identifying potential threats. Beverly Browning had joined as head of corporate security, working alongside Derek to protect the expanded empire. Their combined networks created an early warning system for any potential threats. After the meeting, Edward invited them all to his home for dinner. James and Courtney arrived first, their relationship stronger for having survived the crisis. "The Antonio Pollard Foundation launches next week," James told his father. "Full scholarships for 10 students already approved." Edward nodded in satisfaction. His mentor's legacy would live on, turning betrayal's lesson into opportunity for others. Ray arrived with news about their security systems. "We've had inquiries from 3 major banks about licensing our protocols. The breach attempt actually showcased our capabilities." Beverly and Derek came together, their professional partnership having evolved into something more personal. They brought updates on Randolph's prison situation. "He tried to trade information for a reduced sentence," Beverly reported. "But we already had everything he could offer." "His appeals were denied," Derek added. 20 years, no possibility of parole. Terry arrived last, carrying old company photos. "Found these in storage. Thought you might want them for the documentary." Tiffany Malone's film had become a corporate case study in betrayal and redemption. Advanced screenings at business schools were already generating buzz. Edward surveyed his new family as they gathered around his table. James and Courtney, their young faces bright with promise. Ray, brilliant and loyal. Beverly and Derek, vigilant protectors. Terry, proof that redemption was possible for those who earned it. He raised his glass. To new beginnings. Later that night, Edward sat in his study, looking at two photographs. One showed his original team, himself, Miranda, Terry, all young and eager. The other showed his current inner circle, tempered by betrayal but stronger for it. The leather-bound album from the anniversary party sat on his desk. Tomorrow, he would visit Randolph in prison, delivering a new album filled with photos of the empire he'd tried to steal, now grown even larger. On his computer, a notification showed another wire transfer to the Antonio Pollard Foundation. His mentor's death had taught him the true cost of betrayal. Now that lesson would help others protect themselves. A text from James appeared. Ray found another attempt to breach our systems. Chinese hackers this time. We shut them down in seconds. Edward smiled. Let them try. His new family had built something unbreakable. An empire forged in betrayal's fire, but tempered by loyalty's strength. The final page of Tiffany's documentary script lay on his desk. The title read, The Price of Betrayal. How Edward McBride Turned Treachery into Triumph. Edward closed the anniversary album. The past was settled. The future belonged to those who understood loyalty's value and betrayal's cost. Epilogue. 10 years later. Cut. That's perfect, Mr. McBride. Tiffany Malone lowered her camera, satisfaction evident in her voice. The 10th anniversary follow-up is going to be even better than the original. Edward McBride, now 55, stood in his expanded office at McBride Global Headquarters. A decade of continued success had only enhanced his commanding presence. His hair had turned fully silver, but his piercing gaze remained as sharp as ever. How many awards did the first documentary win? He asked, straightening his Brioni suit. 5, including Best Documentary at Sundance. Tiffany checked her footage. But this story, watching how everyone evolved over 10 years, it's extraordinary. Edward moved to his desk, where multiple screens displayed real-time data from McBride Global's operations. The company had grown from a Boston cybersecurity firm into an international technology empire, with offices in 15 countries. Dad. James McBride burst into the office, tablet in hand. Beijing just signed. We got the contract. At 29, James had grown into a formidable executive. As Chief Technology Officer of McBride Global, he'd expanded their cybersecurity protocols into artificial intelligence and quantum encryption. How's Courtney handling the Singapore expansion? Edward asked. See for yourself. James pulled up a video call. Courtney McBride appeared on screen, her office overlooking Singapore's Marina Bay. She'd risen from the management training program to become head of Asia-Pacific operations. Her marriage to James 3 years ago had made headlines in the business world. The merger's complete, she reported. Local authorities approved our security standards. We start implementation next week. Edward nodded with approval. Your father's still refusing visitors? Last I heard. Courtney's face hardened slightly. He tried writing to me again from prison. Something about born-again Christianity and seeking forgiveness. Randolph hasn't changed, Edward stated flatly. He's just found a new manipulation tactic. After serving 10 years of his sentence, Randolph Phelps had attempted to reinvent himself as a reformed man. His request for early release had been denied, thanks to Beverly Browning's thorough documentation of his ongoing attempts to manipulate prison staff and fellow inmates. Speaking of the old days, James interjected, Ray's team just caught another attempt to breach the quantum encryption. Russians this time. Send them our usual response? Already done. Their systems will be finding our calling cards for months. Ray Gray had transformed McBride Global's cybersecurity division into the world's most respected digital defense force. His marriage to James's sister Sarah, born 2 years after the Randolph incident, during Edward's second marriage to Catherine Chun, had further strengthened the family's technical dynasty. A notification popped up on Edward's screen, Derek Zhang requesting entry. Now global head of physical security, Derek had built an intelligence network that rivaled some government agencies. "Come in, Derek." Derek entered with Beverly, their wedding rings glinting. Their marriage 5 years ago had merged their security operations into an unbeatable force. Terry Gorman's report, Derek handed over a tablet. The Boston expansion is ahead of schedule. Terry's redemption had become legendary in corporate circles. After proving his loyalty during the Randolph affair, he'd risen to become regional director of Northeast operations. His division consistently led the company in innovation and growth. "The Antonio Pollard Foundation numbers?" Edward asked. 300 graduates this year, Beverly reported. 90% already placed in cybersecurity positions. The scholarship programs become the industry's most prestigious. Edward touched the foundation's logo on his screen. Over the past decade, he'd turned his mentor's tragedy into a force for positive change. The foundation not only provided education, but also worked to expose and prevent financial fraud worldwide. "And Miranda?" Tiffany asked softly, her camera still rolling. Edward's expression remained neutral. "Living in Paris, last I heard. Remarried to some art dealer." The divorce settlement had left Miranda comfortable but excluded from the business world. Her attempts to launch a consulting firm had failed when Edward's reputation made potential clients hesitant to work with her. "The new Mrs. McBride is far more suitable," Derek commented. Catherine Chen McBride had entered Edward's life 7 years ago as a brilliant quantum physicist working on encryption algorithms. Their marriage had added cutting-edge technical expertise to McBride Global's leadership. Their daughter Sarah, now 6, was already showing signs of inheriting both parents' intellectual capabilities. The documentary premiere, Tiffany changed the subject. "We're set for next month at the Riverside Country Club." Appropriate venue, Edward mused. The same ballroom where he'd exposed Miranda's betrayal would now showcase his empire's triumph. A holographic display activated, showing Catherine in her quantum lab. "Edward, the qubit breakthrough works. We can implement the new security protocol immediately." Edward smiled at his wife's image. Catherine's genius had helped McBride Global maintain its technological edge. Their partnership, built on mutual respect and shared vision, had none of the weaknesses that had doomed his first marriage. "Sarah's school called," Catherine added. She corrected her physics teacher again. "That's my girl." Edward's pride was evident. Sarah had his strategic mind and her mother's scientific brilliance, a powerful combination for the future leader of McBride Global. James pulled up another screen. "The Della Brennan Women's Center needs approval for their expansion budget." After testifying against Randolph, Della had channeled her experience into helping other women escape manipulative relationships. Edward's funding had turned her small support group into a national organization. "Approve it," Edward commanded. "Double the amount they requested." Bernadette Patrick's fate served as a cautionary tale at the center. After serving 5 years for corporate espionage, she'd been unable to find employment in any reputable company. Her brother, similarly blacklisted, had left the country. "Sir," Derek interrupted, "the Pentagon's on line 1. They want to discuss implementing our quantum encryption." Edward gestured, activating the secure line. In 10 years, he transformed a personal vendetta into an empire that safeguarded governments and corporations worldwide. The betrayal that could have destroyed him had instead become the foundation of unprecedented success. Later that evening, Edward sat in his study at home, surrounded by mementos of his journey. The original anniversary album sat in a glass case, a reminder of the day everything changed. Beside it stood a photo of his new family: Catherine, brilliant and loyal; Sarah, precocious and determined; James and Courtney, proving that love could survive betrayal; Ray and the second Sarah, representing the perfect blend of family and innovation. "Daddy," young Sarah burst in, waving a tablet. "I wrote a program." Edward pulled his daughter onto his lap, examining her code. "Very impressive. But look here, you could make it more efficient." As he guided Sarah through the programming logic, Edward reflected on the darkness that had led to this light. The betrayal had cost him a wife, but given him an empire. The pain had been transformed into power, the loss into legacy. Tiffany's camera captured this tender moment for her documentary's final scene. The ruthless corporate warrior who had destroyed his betrayers was also a devoted father, nurturing the next generation of his dynasty. In his private safe, Edward kept one last album. It contained photos of Randolph's downfall, Miranda's exile, and Bernadette's arrest. Once a year, he reviewed it, not from bitterness, but as a reminder. Trust was earned, loyalty was tested, and betrayal was never forgotten. McBride Global's motto, displayed in every office worldwide, summed up the lesson: trust through strength, success through vigilance. The words were accompanied by an image of two hands, one extended in partnership, the other gripping a sword. The Antonio Pollard Foundation had a different motto: protecting dreams, preventing nightmares. Its graduates went into the world armed with both technical skills and Edward's hard-earned wisdom about human nature. A message flashed on Edward's screen. The quantum encryption team had found another vulnerability in a competitor's system. Following standard procedure, they would notify the company while simultaneously offering McBride Global's superior protection. "Daddy," Sarah pointed to the code. "Why not use a quantum loop here?" Edward studied his daughter's suggestion. "Brilliant. Just like your mother." Catherine appeared in the doorway, her lab coat exchanged for elegant evening wear. "The governor's waiting, ready to announce the new cybersecurity initiative." Edward stood, lifting Sarah into his arms. A decade ago, he'd stood in the Riverside Country Club and exposed a betrayal. Tonight, in the same venue, he would announce technology that would help prevent others from suffering similar fates. The original documentary played on screens throughout McBride Global's offices, reminding employees of their company's origin story. But the real lesson wasn't in the betrayal or even the revenge. It was in what came after: the transformation of personal pain into global power. Randolph Phelps, still serving his sentence, would never know how completely his attempt to destroy Edward had backfired. The empire he tried to steal had grown beyond his wildest dreams, guided by the very man he'd attempted to betray. Miranda's Paris apartment contained no mementos of her time as Mrs. McBride. She learned to live with her choices, watching from afar as her ex-husband's influence grew and their son carried forward a legacy she could have shared. But in Edward's study, surrounded by the family that had emerged from those ashes, the past was simply prologue. The betrayal had taught him to be ruthless, but life had taught him to be wise. His new family, built on strength rather than weakness, would carry that wisdom forward. The last shot of Tiffany's documentary would show Edward at his desk, young Sarah on his lap, teaching her to code. Behind them, the quantum displays would flash with data from their global operations. And on the wall, in elegant script, the words that had become both warning and promise: betrayal teaches once, if you survive. Loyalty builds forever, if you're strong enough to maintain it. The McBride legacy, forged in betrayal's fire and tempered by time's wisdom, would endure. Not as a story of revenge, but as a testament to the power of transforming pain into purpose, betrayal into empire, and loss into an enduring legacy of strength. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.